My name is Melissa Turner. I am 28 years old, and 14 hours after I gave birth to my daughter, a stranger walked into my hospital room and told me the baby in my arms was hers. I want you to understand what 14 hours after birth looks like before I tell you the rest of this story. It looks like exhaustion that is unlike any other exhaustion you have ever felt, not just physical, though that is significant, but cellular. Every part of you has been through something enormous. You are held together by adrenaline and the specific, overwhelming love that arrives with a newborn, and underneath both of those things is a fragility that is real even when you do not feel it. I was in that state. Holding my daughter, Emma, 6 pounds and 11 ounces, born at 4:47 in the morning on a Thursday in June at St. Michael's Medical Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. My husband, David, had gone to get food from the cafeteria. The nurses had just done a check and left. The room was quiet and warm, and I was looking at Emma's face with the specific focus of a new mother learning the map of her child for the first time. The door opened. I assumed it was David, or a nurse, or one of the other routine entries that punctuate a hospital stay. It was a woman I had never seen in my life. She was perhaps 40 years old, well-dressed, with dark hair pulled back and the composure of someone who has decided, before walking through a door, exactly what she is going to say and how she is going to say it. She was not a hospital employee. No badge, no scrubs, no uniform of any kind. She walked in as if she belonged there and stood at the foot of my bed and looked at Emma. Her expression was not hostile. That was the disorienting part. It was certain. The expression of someone stating a fact. She pointed at my daughter. "That child is mine," she said. The word mine landed in the room with a weight I could feel physically. My arms tightened around Emma automatically, the instinct so fast and complete that it happened before my mind had processed the sentence. A nurse who had been passing in the hallway and had seen the woman enter came to the doorway. She looked at the situation with an expression of rapidly assembling alarm. "Get her out," I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. "Get her out of this room right now." Nobody moved. The woman had not moved. The nurse in the doorway had not moved. Another nurse who had appeared behind the first was frozen in place, looking between me and the woman and Emma and the specific, unresolvable quality of a situation that had no clear protocol. And then my doctor walked in. Dr. Anita Sharma, my OB, who had delivered Emma 14 hours earlier and who appeared now in the doorway with the quick, assessing look of someone who reads rooms for a living. She took in the situation in approximately 2 seconds. Me in the bed holding my daughter, the woman at the foot of the bed, the frozen nurses. She said nothing. She walked to the nurse's station window in my room, picked up the patient file, and read it. Not quickly, carefully. The room was absolutely still while she read. Then she looked up at the woman and did something nobody in that ward expected. The woman's face went completely pale. She never came back. But before I tell you what actually happened, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Now, let's begin. I need to tell you about the pregnancy before I tell you what happened in that room, because the pregnancy is where this story actually begins. David and I had been trying to have a child for 3 years. 3 years of the specific emotional mathematics of fertility treatment, the hope and the waiting and the numbers that mean something and the numbers that don't, and the recalibrating, and the trying again. We had done 2 rounds of IVF. The second round had worked. I want to say that plainly because it matters for what comes later. Emma was conceived through IVF. My eggs, David's sperm, fertilized in a laboratory, transferred to my body, carried by me for 38 weeks and 4 days. This is not a complicated fact. It is simply what it is. But it becomes significant when I tell you about the woman. Her name, I learned later, through the investigation that followed what happened in my hospital room, was Linda Greer. She was 41 years old. She had also been undergoing fertility treatment at a different clinic than the one David and I had used, and she had experienced multiple failed IVF cycles over 4 years. What she had also experienced, and this is the part that matters, the part that Dr. Sharma found when she picked up my file and read it carefully, was a specific documented psychiatric episode that had been flagged in her medical history. An episode that had occurred during her second failed IVF cycle, in which her grief and her desperation had combined into a delusional belief that a child existed who was hers and was being kept from her. She had received treatment. She had been stable. And then she had seen, through some combination of social media and the particular porousness of small community information, that I had delivered a baby at St. Michael's. And something in her had fractured. She had come to claim what the fractured part of her genuinely believed was hers. Dr. Sharma read my file because she knew what to look for. Not specifically. She had not known Linda Greer was going to walk through my door. But she had been practicing obstetrics for 16 years. And in 16 years, you develop an understanding of the landscape of fertility-related grief and the specific forms that grief can take when it goes unmanaged. She had seen, in the dynamic of that room, the woman's certainty, the particular quality of her claim, the way she was looking at Emma, a pattern she recognized. She picked up my file and read it carefully because the file contained Emma's full birth documentation, the delivery record, the IVF documentation from our fertility clinic that had been included as part of my prenatal record, the genetic screening results, the chain of custody for every step of Emma's conception and gestation and birth. Everything, documented, time-stamped, medically and legally complete. She read it in the full silence of the room. Then she looked at Linda Greer. She said, "I am Dr. Anita Sharma, the attending physician for this patient. I have the complete medical record of this birth in my hands. I know exactly where this baby came from, how she was conceived, and who carried her. I know it in clinical detail that is not ambiguous and is not open to interpretation." She paused. "I also know that you are in a great deal of pain," she said. Her voice had changed slightly, still firm, but with something underneath it that was not coldness. "And I know that what you are feeling is real to you, even if what you believe is not accurate. I am asking you to step out of this room right now, and I am telling you that someone is going to come and sit with you and make sure you have the help you need." She turned to the nurse in the doorway. "Call Dr. Marcus in psychiatry. Tell him I need him on this floor." The nurse left immediately. Dr. Sharma looked at Linda Greer one more time. "This is not your child," she said, quietly, directly, without cruelty. "I can prove that to you if you're able to hear it. But right now I need you to step into the hallway." Linda Greer's face had gone pale during this. Not the pale of someone who has been caught doing something deliberately wrong. The pale of someone whose certainty is being met by something immovable and who is beginning, somewhere underneath the fractured thing, to feel it give way. She stepped back. Then again. She reached the doorway. She stood there for a moment, looking at Emma in my arms, and her face did something complicated and painful that I have thought about many times since. And then she turned and walked down the hallway. She never came back. Dr. Marcus arrived within 10 minutes. He spoke with Linda Greer in a quiet room down the hall. What happened in that room I cannot tell you completely, because it is her private medical matter and not mine to narrate. What I know from the hospital's communication with me afterward, through the patient advocacy process that was opened after the incident, is that she was assessed, that appropriate steps were taken, and that she was not left alone. David came back from the cafeteria to find 2 security personnel in the hallway outside our room, and Dr. Sharma seated in the chair beside my bed explaining what had happened. He stood in the doorway with a sandwich bag in his hand and went through 3 distinct expressions in about 4 seconds. Then he came and sat beside me on the bed and put his arm around me and Emma, and we all 3 stayed like that for a while without talking. Dr. Sharma filed an incident report. The hospital security and administration teams reviewed the circumstances of how Linda Greer had accessed the maternity ward, a gap in the visitor protocols that was identified and addressed. A formal report was made to local law enforcement, not to pursue criminal charges, but to create a documented record in case there were future incidents. Dr. Marcus followed up on Linda Greer's care through the appropriate channels. I was discharged 2 days later with Emma, healthy and complete. In the car seat, we had spent 40 minutes watching a YouTube video to learn how to install correctly. I have thought about Linda Greer many times in the 14 months since Emma was born. It is not a simple thing to think about. She frightened me in a room where I was at my most vulnerable, holding my hour-old daughter, in a moment that should have been only quiet and warm and entirely safe. The fear of that was real and took time to settle. But I have also thought about the 4 years she spent trying to have a child. The failed cycles. The grief that builds in a person who wants something with that completeness and cannot get to it, cycle after cycle. I know something about that landscape, 3 years of it before Emma, and I know that I was luckier than many people who travel it. I came through with my daughter. Not everyone does. What Linda Greer experienced in that ward was not sanity. It was the thing that happens when grief accumulates beyond what a person can hold and breaks through in ways they cannot control. I am not a psychiatrist, and I do not have clinical language for it. I only know that looking at her face in the doorway, the specific expression as the certainty gave way, I saw a person in tremendous pain. I hope she got the help she needed. I genuinely do. Emma is 14 months old now. She has David's nose and my stubbornness, which everyone who meets her identifies immediately. She pulls herself up on the furniture and looks enormously proud of the achievement, and then sits down hard and looks surprised, every single time, as if she did not expect that outcome. I have told very few people the full story of what happened in that hospital room. Most of the people who know us know only that there was an incident after Emma was born and that it was resolved quickly. This is enough for most purposes. What I want to say about Dr. Sharma specifically is this. She walked into a room in which every other person was frozen, in which the absence of clear protocol and the shock of an unprecedented situation had created a paralysis that could have lasted long enough to make things significantly worse. She walked in and she assessed, and she acted with the specific combination of authority and humanity that her 16 years of practice had built into her. She did not match Linda Greer's certainty with aggression. She did not call security immediately and create a confrontation that would have been frightening and chaotic. She read the file. She made her knowledge visible. She made the documentation real. She gave Linda Greer's fragmenting certainty something solid and immovable to break against. And then she addressed the pain underneath the behavior with the same directness she had given everything else. She said, "I know you are in a great deal of pain, and that is not your child. Both things. At the same time, that is what a doctor is supposed to do. That is what good medicine looks like in a room where the problem is not physiological." I sent Dr. Sharma a note 6 weeks after we came home. I thanked her for what she had done. She wrote back briefly, a few sentences, professional and warm, the way she is always professional and warm, and the last line said, "Emma is very lucky to have parents who fought so hard for her before she existed." I read that in the kitchen while Emma was asleep, and I pressed my hand against my chest and stood very still for a moment. We fought hard for her. 3 years and 2 rounds of IVF, and all the hope and grief and recalibrating that goes into that. And then we fought for her again, in a hospital room on a Thursday morning, in a way we had not anticipated and could not have prepared for. She was worth every single part of it. She still is. Every morning when she pulls herself up on the furniture and looks enormously proud and then sits down hard with that expression of perpetual surprise, she is worth every single part of it. That has never been in doubt, not for one day.